Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Susan Moore. I'm the Community Engagement Manager at IIBA. I am very excited to have Howard Podeswa join us today for something we're calling Expert Insights. Today, we're going to be talking with Howard about enhancing your business analysis toolkit. He is the author of 3 books, and we're going to tell you where you can find those books because you'll definitely want to get your hands on those after today. He is not only a speaker and an author, but he's been a practitioner for a long time. And he has been helping large organizations optimize their analysis and planning practices for agile software. And you are really going to see that expertise in these books. He takes all of those lessons learned and he's put it into these books. Let's take a look at which books we're talking about today. Here they are: The Business Analyst Handbook, UML for the IT Business Analyst, a practical guide to requirements gathering using the unified modeling language. And then his most recent book, which is the Agile Guide to Business Analysis and Planning. More on that. Yeah. So those are the books that we'll be talking about. 2 of those books, if you are an IIBA member, 2 of those books are available in our online digital library. That is probably one of the top benefits that you get when you become an IIBA member. There is both a desktop app and a mobile app. So if you like to read your books online while you're sitting by the beach or a warm fire, whatever season it is, we've got a mobile app that you'll be able to access these. And Howard's books, you'll find, have a lot of materials in them. So many of these books have links where you can download additional content. Plus, they have lots of templates and things like that. Okay, so I have been talking. Howard, I'm going to let you introduce yourself really quickly to our audience.
Well, hi everybody. I don't know where to begin, but I've been in this, as Susan mentioned, I've been in the business here for quite a while. I think I'm looking at the old days. I think, well, I'm aging myself here, but I started in the late 1970s, so that really gives you a little bit of breadth there. I started out as a developer, and I was really started out the technical side. I eventually became a systems analyst, what today I guess would be called the systems architect, although we didn't have that title back then. My job often included, speaking with stakeholders and users about what they need, developing the solution or working with the team to develop a solution, installing the solution, testing it, then working with them on enhancements. And all of it, in some jobs that I had, I did little parts of those things, but I actually worked in some companies where I did all of it all together. And all of this was before there was any business analysis as a profession. But I guess it was somewhere around the 1990s, business analysis started to emerge. I first became aware of it really because it was being offered as a job position, sort of a new type of job position in companies. And this is before IIBA actually sort of, made it a thing.
That's right.
Around that same time, I also started to move more towards coaching roles as well, instead of just doing the actual work all myself. And I got more and more interested in that aspect of things in product development, the whole business analysis part of it. And as it was a new field and a very exciting one, and it just felt like something that was going to grow and a place that I wanted to be. I think I'd gotten very, very deep into the technical side at that point, and as deep as I wanted to go. And I was ready for a change, and I thought, a job that would focus on the whole stakeholder engagement part of it would be a really interesting way to go. And I haven't regretted it ever since. It's been really an amazing thing. It's an interesting journey for anyone who's doing the same thing, because many people get into development, probably like myself, because you don't like talking to people very much, and you like to be sitting on your own, working things out, working out your puzzles in your own brain. Of course, always do have to communicate, but a lot of the work is done alone. And in contrast, business analysis is a very social activity. But I found it a great move. And for anybody who has a combination of both, sort of analytical skills as well as soft skills, it's a great combo and a great profession to be in.
it really can be an exciting job. I mean, I
Yeah.
know sometimes it doesn't seem that way, but you really are in most organizations on the leading edge of whatever
Hmm.
those changes are. So
So
if you're
much. Yeah.
curious, if you like solving problems or like, you know, getting really hands-on with stuff, I think the business analysis profession is probably for you. Um, because
Yeah.
it
Rachel's saying here it's never boring, and that's absolutely.
That's true. And
Yeah.
right, we in the business analysis world, you probably don't have the same day twice.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So just to go
Well,
back to my own trajectory on that, so around that time, as IIBA was just starting up as well, and they were based in Toronto, and I'm a Toronto-based person, and I just eventually we met up very quickly, and so I did a lot of work with IIBA in the early days. I was a reviewer for actually probably all versions of the Babok. I was a reviewer for the Agile Guide. I've done some work with PMI as well, reviewing their guides. So yeah, aside from my own writing, I've also been trying to, help out wherever I can with the community.
yeah, and I think that's the really important piece of this is that you really have been part of the community for quite a while. And in these books, each of these books actually reference IIBA. They also reference some of what I'll call the sister organizations, like ITIL, like PMI. So that's I think that speaks a lot to how connected you have been because these organizations have been incorporating business analysis into their um, artifacts, their guides,
Mm.
really alongside your whole writing career. So it has been, I think, a really you can see that in the books. Well, let's get started with
Mm.
the first book here.
Yes.
Now, so this first book that we'll talk about, this is we'll refer to it as UML, but UML is the Unified Modeling Language.
Mm.
This is, again, it is available in our digital library. And Howard, you told me something very interesting when we first
Mm.
got on today, and that is it's actually hard to get your hands on a hard copy of this.
Yes, it is. What's happened is my first two books were published originally by Thomson Publishing, a very large publishing house. But somewhere along the way, somewhere between the first and second edition, I think, they decided to divest themselves of this line of the business, this side of the technical writing business, and they sold it off to a company called Cengage, which has had various ups and downs since then, including even being bankrupt at one point, and then coming back, being pulled back from it. So as a result of all of those troubles with that publishing company, it is difficult to get your hands actually on these books. And I'm actually grateful IIBA has them. It's one of the, it is actually one of the places to get them right now, one of the main places to get it. Yeah, so that's just a little bit in terms of, the getting of the book.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write this book.
yeah. Well, I had been coaching a lot of teams at that time, and um, a number of and I was actually very fortunate to be working with some really great organizations that were doing really forward-looking work at the time. So I'm thinking of particularly some banks. A lot of it was in the financial industry, and then later on in the telecom industry as well. Where you had some directors within their section of the company who were really in on something that was called iterative incremental development at that time, which later became agile development. So started up in the 90s, and so they were getting into these iterative processes, precursors to agile. One of them was the rational unified process, which was a very popular one at the time. It's now owned by IBM. And what they were finding is that they'd get the consultants coming in, from IBM or whatever, and they would do a really good job explaining to them how to use the tools around the actual development side of the picture. But when it came to the requirements analysis side of the picture, they weren't doing a very good job explaining how that part of the process actually really works in iterative development. How much of the requirements do you pick up before, and do you solidify before the project actually starts? Once development actually begins, how do you make changes, and how does this all work? And when do you do which models? None of it was clear to the teams that I was working with. And so because they were dissatisfied with the outside coaching they were getting, they brought me in. In other words, the vendor coaching didn't seem to deal with that part. And I found that that was a common problem with pretty well all the companies that I was working with who were trying to do this agile, iterative thing. The business analysis piece was not very well understood. So in order to really help them with that, I began coaching them. And after a number of years of coaching, decided to put all of my notes and all the lessons learned, working with all these teams into a book so that everybody, would have access to it. And hence the book, UML for the IT Business Analyst. So I guess I chose UML partly because of my own history with it. I got into iterative development, the BA side of iterative development with companies that were using the Rational Unified process, which uses this particular standard. But really my goal was to really teach the business analysis process, to have somebody be able to walk through like, okay, here we have a vision for a product or an idea, or even for a major change to an existing product that we would like to make. How do we go from this idea, this vision, all the way down into the detailed requirements? And, what's the path for doing that? And the fact of using the UML was I thought, well, I'd like to have some standard that would cover that whole process, that whole life cycle. And the only one that I knew that was actually complete enough to do that was the UML, which is the reason that I chose it. And it's the reason actually the UML became popular at that time, because it is one of the most comprehensive standards out there. But the truth is that every diagram that you can do in the UML, you can do using another standard. For example, the business processing modeling notation has workflow diagrams that are very much the same as activity diagrams from the UML. So the process is the same, and my focus really isn't on the tool itself, on the standard itself, but really on the activities and the process that you go through.
Yeah, I think when we talked about this is a UML book that really uses UML as a means to an end, because if you think about it historically, really IIBA had just formed, so this year's our 20th anniversary.
Congratulations.
So, right? And so they were just starting to put together the business analysis body of knowledge. So this book was being written at the same time that other version, or the first version of the Babak was being written. So I think that's important, because you're right. There was not a standard. And I can remember when I first got into business analysis, it wasn't called, my company didn't call it that. But the first training courses I took were around object-oriented, whatever.
Right.
Yes. Those were the what did they used to call it? It was the web training.
Object-oriented programming systems was one of the acronyms back then, which I love.
Yeah. And so that's what I can remember. So when I started to go through this book, I thought, oh, this takes me back to how to do this. And you're right. That was really the only framework that we had, but it really was very helpful in giving you a structured way of thinking about business analysis. So let's take a look. So it's some of the takeaways from this book. So if you by the way, for our audience, we're doing something a little different today. So we are interested in the questions that you have for Howard. So if you've got questions, you can put those into the Q&A box, and we'll take those along the way. Or you can put them into chat, but Q&A just makes it a little bit easier. Here's some of the takeaways. Again, UML as a means of requirement solicitation. Really, it was that structured framework at a time where that framework was just really starting to evolve. But another thing that's clear in this book is it's about getting inside your stakeholders' minds. You use the phrase making the unconscious conscious. Why is that important?
Well, there's, I'm thinking of this, my partner at the time years ago, when I was working on it was a airplane scheduling system, right, for an airline. And she also got a job there, working as a person working the phones at the same time as I was working on their computer system. And I remember when she first got that job, her boss showed her what to do. And obviously the boss knew exactly what to do. But afterwards, she was just threw up her arms. It was a total panic. She had no idea what he was talking about. Here was a person who knew the system really well, and knew what the requirements were and knew what the process was, but was not able to explain it. He couldn't get it out of his head into somebody else's head, and which is so important at every stage of not just product development, but after once the product is out there. And so this is what I see as the primary job of an analyst, is to take the knowledge that's, all of us know how to tie our shoes. All of us know or many of us know how to tie a tie. Fewer and fewer, mind you, on that one. But it's very, very difficult to actually be able to explain to somebody in a way that they'll be able to do the same thing. And that's the job really of a business analyst. Diagrams help you do that, because they take what's sort of an unconscious knowledge and they make it tangible, as you mentioned, Susan. They make it visible to somebody else. And once you have it visible, people can then respond to it, right? So you talk about reconciling differing viewpoints here on this slide. I can show that diagram to somebody and they can say, oh, no, it's wrong. It's wrong. This thing should happen before that thing. You've got the order wrong on a workflow diagram. That's actually fantastic. That is the whole beauty of it. In fact, I would say one of the biggest lessons I've learned over the years with respect to not just diagrams, but really any business analysis artifact is it does not have to be perfect. You get it's as we say here, it's an elicitation tool primarily. Mm-hmm. So get some version of it, done, and get it out there in front of stakeholders and let them respond to it. People are much better at finding things that they don't like and finding mistakes than they are at it just right off the bat explaining what the right way is. So if you just give them something, even those errors that are in the diagram are actually going to be very, very valuable from a discovery point of view.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think the diagrams you create that are wrong will definitely elicit more discussion than the ones that are right. So let's not feel pressure to get these things right. Exactly. Let's just get down what we think is the picture.
And in terms of like the unconscious, and how these can be such great elicitation tools, I'll just give you a very quick example if we have time. I was talking in front of a group. I think it was actually this would happen at a BA World, and I was discussing union. Somehow we got talking about their a package that they had just purchased, and had to keep track. And it was to do with HR. Had to keep, and one of the things they had to do is keep track of the unions that employees belong to, or the union. This, as we'll see, is an interesting question. So I started to, as an illustration, I just started to draw a little class diagram that connected union with employee. And anybody who knows about these diagrams, could be a class diagram or an entity relationship diagram. You have to fill in some numbers, or the diagram is not complete. So this is what I mean by an elicitation tool. I had to ask a question in order to complete the diagram. So the question I asked was, how many unions can an employee belong to? And I was sure the answer would be 1, but I just had to put a number in there. And they said, oh, I can't believe you asked me that question. I said, well, what do you mean? They're like, well, we actually bought the system and we needed employees to be able to belong to more than one union. But in fact, the system that we bought only allowed for a single union membership per employee. And this became a very expensive fix later on. It took me about 5 minutes to find that requirement using that diagram. And that's what I'm talking about. The great beauty of even doing a small, even incomplete diagram.
Yeah. And also, I think the power of asking the question that might be obvious to some, but not obvious to others. The fact that you said, how many unions can you be part of? Right.
Yeah.
You thought 1. They were like, no, you can be multiple.
Yeah.
Right. That's the classic dumb question that's not really dumb.
Yes.
So that's the other thing that I think that these diagrams can do. And you mentioned that also in the book. Diagrams can help you to drive interviews, because if I have a picture, I can start to ask you questions about it.
Exactly. So, another example with that similar tool is I was working with, this is years ago, so I can name names, with CGI, who was working on, I think it was Portugal Telecom project at the time. And they went on and on about this product group this, product group that. And I just asked the dumb question, I'm sorry, but I don't know what you mean by product group. Well, when I asked the question, it turned out half the people in that audience, in that group of stakeholders, thought that it meant one thing, like a package of you buy this telephone line, you get all these features along with it. And that's how we sell it as a marketing thing. And another group of people felt, no, a product group is your particular line and the things that you have attached to your particular line, regardless of how it was sold and marketed to you. And it's a very, very different thing. I was able to discern the difference by doing some modeling with them. And that's what actually pointed out the difference. But if no one had asked that dumb question, we would have had a whole discussion about product groups, and one half of the group would be thinking that we're talking about one thing, another half thought thinks we're talking about something else.
Yeah, this is really powerful. We do have a couple of questions.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. Let me go back here and see. So we've got one. I don't know if this is really a question. It's in the chat. The BA standard, simple but touches all areas, and maybe that person is talking in chat. Okay, I think what's going on over there, they're chatting with each other. Awesome. We love it when you chat with each other. Indira asks the question, when the
Yeah.
diagram is right,
Yeah.
quotes, with no feedback or comments, how do you make sure it's really right?
If you have no feedback or comment, you can't be sure. I don't think you can be. I mean, how do you make up these diagrams? You make up these diagrams by talking to people.
Yeah.
Or by you found an old artifact somewhere. That also happens, right? An old model somewhere. How do you know it's still relevant? How do you know that's still up to date? You've got to check it with people.
Yeah, and I think that's just it. The diagram doesn't just stand on its own. It really is it's a conversational
Yeah.
tool.
You know, I remember I had a job a number of years ago with whew, and at some point I asked them, do you have a workflow diagram for this? You know, it had to do with onboarding new customers. And they said, no, we don't have one. Said, well, it just didn't sound right to me. Like, you know, we were revamping an old system. There had to have been something there. Eventually he pulls out, he had it actually in his desk, but didn't want to show it to me. Didn't want to show it to me because he didn't think it was right.
Hmm.
I said, thank you for showing it to me because I don't need it to be right. And you're quite correct. It's probably not up to date, right? Going to this question. However, it's a fantastic artifact to have to bounce around with stakeholders, which is what I did. And by doing that, we got the right one eventually.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think this is all about the power of diagrams. So really, that's what UML allowed you to talk about in this
Mm-hmm.
book.
Yeah.
So there are tons of additional resources in this book. And so
Mm-hmm.
even if you don't necessarily want to learn UML, but you are interested in all kinds of techniques and things like that, there are diagram examples in here. There are job aids, there are
Yeah.
templates and tables, tons
Mm-hmm.
of stuff that are in here that apply today. You
Sure. In
can,
fact, you know, even the use case approach, which has been around for a long, long time. It was
yes.
actually part of that rational unified process way back. And even before that, it was part of OOSC, if anybody remembers that one. It's still extremely powerful. And I see that every so often when I put a little posting about use cases on LinkedIn, I get like huge response. It turns out that use cases as a elicitation tool and as a documentation tool to document requirements after the fact um, are much more powerful than user stories alone. And we can get into that another time, but user stories don't tie together various pieces of work that all are related to the same user task. They don't automatically do that, whereas use cases do. In a use case, all of those user stories are represented basically as flows within the use case. And so you have it all in one big package, which is so great, you know, to see the whole picture of a user task in one place.
I think that use cases are really the unsung hero
Mm-hmm.
um, of, you know, just of all the techniques that we
Yeah.
do.
And another
Because,
technique in that UML book, sorry to interrupt one second, is I just wanted to mention state transition diagrams,
ooh, that's
which
another one.
I wasn't sure if they were going to survive all of the changes that have happened over the years, but they're still extremely powerful tool. And I still talk to developers today who are using them for all kinds of things. Most recently was a team working on a Uber-like application, and they were using that to keep track of what states a ride can be in. You know, the ride at one point is assigned, it's canceled, um, and they use that as a communication device to talk to different stakeholders. You know, did we get this right?
Yep, yep. Yeah, state diagrams are one of the ones that I use a lot as
Mm-hmm.
well.
And the templates too, the system use case template and the business use case template, also very powerful.
Yeah, there's just,
Mm.
I mean, really and truly, Howard, you have packed all of your books with templates. So if anyone out there is looking for templates for things, really these books are the ones that you should take a look at because, and especially this next book that we're going to talk about, the Business Analyst Handbook.
Mm-hmm.
So this one I find particularly interesting because of its origin story, which you talk about in the book,
Mm-hmm.
because you come from an engineering background
Yes,
originally.
yes, that's right.
And so in engineering, there's like a handbook that you use on projects and things.
Yes,
Tell them about this story.
there's a, oh, I remember the name now. I was trying to remember. It's called the Perry's Guide. Anybody who's a
Okay.
chemical engineer out there might know of it. Um, my original training was in chemical engineering, and we had this book was about like that thick, and really just about anything you would need to know on the job as a chemical engineer. You got to look up a formula, whatever. It's all there. And I thought, like, what an amazing thing. Everybody kind of, any chemical engineer at that time used to have it as their Bible. And I thought, why isn't there anything like this for business analysis, and hence the handbook? Um, I think where like my books differentiate, I guess, from what IIBA does, and why I think they two work so well together, is the IIBA in their Babcock publications really lay out for you what the knowledge areas are. It's sort of like a menu of all the things that you need to know about if you're going to be an excellent, if you're going to have excellence as a business analysis professional. What it doesn't do is actually walk you through. It doesn't. It's a little bit thin on things like templates and real practical tools that you need to get the job done. And it also doesn't walk you through the whole process. Like, here I am at the beginning of a project. What do I do now? What do I do next? What happens after that? You don't get that story. So the Business Analyst Handbook is basically to give you a comprehensive reference manual of tools and techniques, not meant to be read end to end. It's more like an encyclopedia of tools that you just pull up when you need something. And then my other books, the UML for the IT Business Analyst, and my more recent one, the Agile Guide, are really meant to walk you through the whole process so that you can actually see what product development looks like from the very beginning until the end.
Yeah. So this one is really all about the who, what, when, where, and why
Yes.
of the work that we do. So you mentioned this can be used as a reference guide, so you don't need to read it cover to cover. In
No.
fact,
No.
there aren't a lot of sections, but the sections are very explicitly named so that if you want to see the different kinds of tools that a BA can use. And by tools, I think you mean the techniques that we
Techniques.
use.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, you can just go to the section and there is not just an example of it, but there's a description, a when you use it, a why you use it, a who you share it with, all of that kind of stuff.
Mm.
It also takes you through the business and analysis activities during all of product development, which I think is another thing that is that makes this book really helpful, particularly if you are working in product development. It gives you a sense for not just what you should be doing, but when along that life cycle.
Mm. Yeah, and there's actually something in there called the Noble Path, which kind of lays out what the techniques are, and then where you would typically introduce them. It should be noted, however, that it's not like you'll use a technique once and then never use it again. It's more, this is the first time you'll probably use it, but then you're going to use it repeatedly over and over again because it is an iterative process. So if you've come up with a work plan, that plan is going to be revised over time, right? It's not a one-shot deal. If you're going to develop class diagrams or use case models, we're not talking about doing the whole thing up front. We're talking about doing a part of it up front, and then adding and adapting over time. But I'd sort of like to think of it more now, and I've called them in the newer book zones of activity. There are certain zones of activity that require particular techniques, and that's how I'd like to think about it now.
The other thing, and we've talked about, you're writing both of these books at the time that IIBA is being formed and that they're putting out the first two editions of the Business Analysis Body of Knowledge. So in this document, you do talk about how it's a structured approach that you're aligning to Babok. And when you talk about that, you're very clear in the book that it's version 2. So I actually put that on here.
Yeah.
Um,
If I
but
had foresight, I would. I couldn't make it into version 3 because it was years before. But yeah,
yeah,
that's correct. Yeah.
but I think that just speaks to how much the profession was growing and people were wanting this kind
Mm-hmm.
of understanding of how to do the job. Where could they, what do they need to bring in order to do the job
Mm-hmm.
most effectively?
I mean, it
Um,
really came from when I was, as I was working with teams, I found that they kind of wanted cheat sheets, little
yeah.
job aid cheat sheets that basically, oh, here's a diagram. I need a quick reference so I can see what all these symbols mean. Or I'm about to go into a meeting. What kind of questions am I supposed to ask right now? Or I'm doing a risk analysis. What are the ITIL risk types? And what are the risk management strategies that I should be considering? Well, I figured, all right, I put together these little cheat sheets for them, for these teams. And over time, it grew and grew and grew and grew until actually my partner at the time said, everybody's using this thing. Why don't you just publish this as a book? This is what makes so much sense. There's obviously a need for it. And that's what we did.
Well, let's see. I'm going over to the Q&A, and I know we've got some Q&A over in chat, but it is coming at me fast. So I am looking at the Q&A box. So if you've got a question over in chat, if you could put it in Q&A. So let's see. There is a question here from Valerie. Any plans to
Mhm.
update the handbook to reflect anything
Yeah,
for the
the
more
handbook.
recent
Oh
Babok
yeah,
guide?
I've been thinking about it. I've been thinking about it. I mean, I would say first of all, in a sense, the Agile Guide to Business Analysis and Planning is the update, although it's not in the same format. Um, the format's, I guess, closer to the UML book, really, and the new book, in that it walks you through the whole process with an example. So we actually walk through a whole case study. Um, I have been thinking about, but it would be nice to have another handbook as well, because just a reference manual that's updated would be good. When I wrote this handbook, Agile was really just coming into play. And so it's incorporated in there, but there is just so many more, so much more that could be added now to what I had then. So yeah, it's something I'm thinking about. Yeah, it's it's a big job. It requires a lot of work, and
And
so I'm
apparently you'll have to find a new publisher.
oh well, that won't be hard. I'm just move it over to my new publisher, and the one I'm using now, which is Pearson, and I'm sure that that would be fine. We've actually discussed doing that, so I guess stay tuned, and we'll see.
Yes, well, hopefully, if you do publish another version, hopefully you'll come back and talk with us about
Mm-hmm.
that.
That'd be cool.
Um, so let's see. I know that you guys are curious what kinds of additional resources are in there. Well, I mentioned there is a whole chapter called a BA Toolkit, which has all kinds of different diagrams, techniques, things like that, and they're all really well explained. There's
Mm-hmm.
also in there tips and checklists, and then there's more templates that
Mm-hmm.
are
Mm-hmm.
available here
Yeah.
as well.
So you'll
Uh,
find templates for system use cases, business use cases, which I think are a really powerful technique that should be more used.
yep.
Um, Business process modeling notation, the BPMN business process diagrams are in there. Um, yeah, various checklists, service level requirements, you know, yeah. And so, yeah, I would say pretty comprehensive for all phases of BA activity.
Yeah, if you are scratching your head looking for a template, I know that you can Google online, but sometimes when you Google and you find stuff, you're not always aware of the website. So if you're looking for something from a trusted source, you could go to this book
Yeah.
and know that it's a good source of
Yeah. I mean,
templates. So,
I did a lot of research too before doing this, just to see, aside from, the templates that I've run into by working with companies, what are all the other ones out there, and really try to, put all the best features, into what you see in that book. So I've tried to, I guess, do some of that running around, on behalf of the readers. You'll also
that
see a template for a complete business requirements document,
yeah, I was going to say that's the
there,
one
how to write up
I
a
know
business
that
case and so on.
we've gotten a lot of requests for is a template for that, and you've got that in here. It is a very complete. BRD template, business requirements document template. So a couple of more comments and questions. So Aisha says templates or cheat sheets are lifesavers, not to mention time savers. Well, then you'll want to check this book out
Yeah.
because it's got tons of them.
And I'd make a little comment on that too. It's, of course I agree, but I say with a caveat or a little warning. I see templates as reminders. Like every little section in that template is reminding you, did you address this issue? Did you address this issue? Like for business processes, did you address what the preconditions are? Did you, specifically say what the post conditions are? Things like that. But does it mean that you have to fill out every section? No. And if you take that opportunity, that approach, you'll end up with a lot of extra words that you don't really need. It's more about reminders about things to address, and then use whatever you're going to find useful in your situation.
And tailor them. Organizations are all
Exactly.
different.
Yeah.
Projects are different.
Yeah.
So these templates really should be a starting point.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely. Glad you
and then
brought that
tailor
up.
them to your
Yes.
need.
Yes.
All right, so a few more comments in here. And thanks everybody. You guys are asking really great questions today.
Katie Metcalf. I haven't heard of her. Hi, Katie. Just noticed I haven't seen her in a while.
Tony asked, should we read the books in any particular order?
Yeah. I would say right now I would go straight to the Agile Guide to Business Analysis and Planning, because it is the most up to date of the books. So you'll see things that are in the UML book, like use cases, for example, are incorporated into the Agile Guide. So you don't have to go all the way back to the UML book to understand that. So I would just go right into the Agile Guide. It gives you the entire process, and it explains it. And then I would use the Business Analyst Handbook as a reference manual.
Okay.
Yeah. Now you could jump into the Analyst Handbook right away, because if you're an active BA right now and there's just tools or techniques that you need to reference immediately, you don't really need to start reading a whole book. You're already doing the job. You just need a reference, and that's great. That you use the book for that. But if you want to actually understand how everything ties together, that's the Agile Guide. It actually shows how all the techniques tie together using the most up-to-date techniques.
All right. And so the next question, Erica, you ask, what is the mobile app name for the IIBA, for the digital library mobile app? I'm going to drop a link to a tutorial that includes the name of the app and also the instructions for how to set it up on your device. It is an Android. They have an Android and an iOS version. Sorry, they don't have it available for Kindle. So I know we've got some folks out there that are Kindle users. Okay, let's maybe take one or two more questions. This question is from Justice. Did your early exposure to the technical side of your career help a lot in digging in deep to write this book and overall make you a better BA?
Yes.
Full stop.
A couple of reasons. Number one, I was alerted to the fact that Agile was going to be a really big deal because of being a developer. Agile really, really took fire, amongst the developer community much before business analysts even became aware that there was a thing. So it's, and the similar, with the UML, I think it's given me a little bit of foresight, I guess, into what's probably going to hit the BA community next, because it usually hits the technical community first, many of these innovations. So there's that. And I think also, although you don't have to be a technical person to be a business analyst, and I really, really want to strongly, emphasize that. One of the beauties of business analysis is that you don't have to be a technical person, so that we're therefore are not excluding people who would really be great at the job, who would be great at interviewing stakeholders and analysts and so on. However, if you do happen to have a technical background, it is definitely helpful. I would say the primary thing it has given me is that I can't be, what's the proper word to use for it? I can't be snowed by developers. Many times, they've tried to do that to me and, give me estimates about work that doesn't sound reasonable. And I think it just gives you a little bit of, a good gut check. If you've had development experience, you kind of know what seems reasonable and what doesn't seem reasonable. You have an idea of the kind of difficulties they're going to run into, even if the technology has changed over time.
Um, I want to give you a shout out for saying that you don't have to have a technical background to be a business analyst. And in
Mm.
fact, even though your technical experience informs these books, you say in several of these books, you may never do an IT project, but what you're what you're seeing in these books can apply to work that you may do on the business side or in other
Exactly,
places.
sure,
Really
exactly. That
important.
that that way of thinking of process workflow, and really being analytical about the sequence in which things happen and the rules that govern the way a process works. I mean, that's a valuable skill, regardless of whether that process will be automated or whether that process will continue to be manual. And you just have to explain it to new employees, or
Yeah.
you want to improve the process.
So, all right. Well, without further ado, let's go talk about your latest book. Now,
Mhm.
this book is not in our online digital library, and part of that is because when you switched publishers, the publishers did not have they didn't have a relationship with the third party vendor that provides
Right.
our library. So this one can be purchased, and actually, I'll include the link if you guys are interested in purchasing this. Um, and we're also going to share a bunch of resources that are available from this book after this webinar today. So they are going to get to, and there might even be little snippets of the book that are included in there. But this is the latest one. This is from 2021, the Agile Guide to Business Analysis and Planning.
Mhm.
Why did you include planning in a book on agile
Yeah,
business analysis? I
yeah, it's a
thought we
good
didn't
question.
plan.
Yeah, yeah, good question. Good question. You thought that we didn't plan because we're BAs or because we're agile? Because both of those
Both,
are interesting
both.
questions. Um, so let's say, first of all, yes, we do plan in agile. If you're a Scrum person, you're at least going to be doing sprint planning at the very least. If you're an XP person, extreme programming, you're also going to be doing release planning. If you're just any regular person, you're probably going to be doing that anyway, or quarterly planning. So, and certainly, of course, there's a degree of planning that happens every single day when you have, when you meet for your daily Scrum. So, I think it's a misnomer to say, or it's wrong to say that agile and planning don't mix. They do, but the nature of the planning differs. So, I guess that's the first thing. Now, why did I combine the two? And that is because um, if you think about your classic waterfall project, which probably never doesn't really exist in that pure form, but let's just say throw it up as a straw dog, all of the requirements are written, baselined, and locked down at the beginning of that project. Afterwards, changes are possible, but they're difficult to do. So you can certainly, because those two ideas are so separated, you can separate out the requirements analysis, which happens primarily before a project and in a waterfall, context, and the planning, which can happen, once you know what your requirements are, then you can sort of plan the rest of the development. That kind of breakdown doesn't make any sense in Agile, and I saw quickly that I wasn't going to be able to separate them out. Why? Because the whole assumption behind Agile is that you're using this approach because you need to be extremely adaptive. You need to be very able to change on a dime. In that case, the context here is a context where requirements are continually changing and they're continually evolving. So it's not like you can lock down the requirements and then create a plan for developing them. The ground is shifting underneath you all the time because the requirements are changing. So I just found it impossible then to actually split them out, and I had to put them together because the requirements that you're planning to develop themselves are changing over time.
Yep.
Well, these are two activities that are really intricately um, uh, together, and I was really pleased to see that when Babok's version of this all came out in their later versions of the Agile extension, and later in the product ownership analysis guide, which I also reviewed. This is pretty clear in there as well.
It is, and I'm sort of joking about,
Mm,
planning and business analysis
yeah.
being part of Agile because clearly Agile Extension, they talk about the three planning horizons that
Hmm.
you might be
Hmm.
working at. And
Yeah.
so this book also tracks pretty closely. In fact, I'll
It
skip
does. It does.
the next question,
Yeah.
but one of the things that you do in this book is you've got a detailed, let's see, what do you call it? You have a map of book chapters that
Hmm.
maps your chapters to IIBA Babok version 3 and the Agile Extension version 2. So if you are interested in how what you're reading in this book applies to that, as well as the PMI guides, which you also did some review of those,
Mm-hmm.
they're business analysis guides. There's a whole, I think you can actually even export it from this book. So
Hmm.
you can see where these things align.
Hmm.
Um, but yes, the key takeaways in this book is you're connecting the work of the business analyst to those agile planning horizons. I think you don't call them horizons, you call them something else, but
Yeah.
they
Here you go.
track.
This is there's the picture which you can actually download in color.
Yep.
And so vertically, you have these zones of activity that I was talking about earlier. Whether it's seeding the backlog as a zone of activity, basically getting all the initial information into the backlog, um, iteration closeout, which would be like the end of a sprint. There are particular activities that happen then and so on. So it's laid out that way from left to right. And then from top to bottom, I have these lanes in that diagram, and they track very, very closely to IIBAs. So what I have is the short lane is basically anything that's in that row, that top row, which would be basically along here, along this top row here, are your basic tools that for any kind of work where you don't need to be planning beyond a medium horizon of a couple of weeks or so. In other words, one or two sprints in advance. So these are a combination of techniques that'll get you through that. The next row below that, I call the long lane, which is the next planning horizon. So now we're looking at planning for the next quarter or planning for the next release. Those are roughly tend to be around the same thing. If you're a Kanban user who does not like time boxes, then it would be planning for an epic, basically. And so all the tools the tools that you need to add in to be able to do that are in that row. And then the third one is for very large projects. So I call that the grand lane, scaled agile. And what it does then is it gives you techniques for coordinating large numbers of teams across a large and long project. And so these do roughly align with the planning horizons in the product ownership analysis and agile extension books of IIBA.
Yeah, and I know I got a question about the Agile extension. So the Agile extension is, I don't want to say it's an add-on to the business analysis body of knowledge, but it is an extension of that book that was published separately. In fact, I've
Mm-hmm.
got my hard copy over my head here.
Yeah.
If you are curious about that book, if you're an IIBA member, you get a free digital copy of that book. If you are not a member, you can find out more about that Agile extension, also the product ownership analysis guide. You can find all of that at iiba.org.
Yeah,
Let's,
I'm a big fan of that product ownership analysis guide. I think that with my agile guide are a really good pair, because again, the POA guide gives you really a compendium of the knowledge areas that you've really got to beef up on as an agile BA or as a product owner, and then my agile guide will then walk you through the whole process chronologically.
yeah, yeah, and I think that's the thing is that what you do a really great job of in all of these books is tying this back to the who, what, when, where, and why of
Mm-hmm.
a project, which sometimes, in some of the guides, they just kind of explain the knowledge in an abstract way. But if you're really
Mm-hmm.
interested in how you actually do this, that's
Yeah.
what all three of these books do.
Like there's a big sections there on tailoring the process. Uh, how agile should you be, for a particular initiative?
Yeah.
Which practices are relevant for that, and which are actually going to get you in trouble. So all of this, it's all really about how to apply things that you may know about, but how do you apply them in particular situations? That's what I try to do very much in that book.
So, in addition to that map of the book chapters, there are, of course, more checklists and job aids in here. So I think that is just something that we come to know about your books.
Mm.
And I know we've gotten a couple of questions about where
Yeah.
can people get this book. Again, this one is the one that is not available in our online digital library. We tried. We tried. Howard tried. The
I tried
publisher
to. I spoke to the
tried.
publisher, like they just couldn't get it to work. But it is
Um,
widely available. You can also get this on Amazon .com, .ca, .de, everywhere. And the publisher Inform IT, and the link again from the IIBA bookstore.
Yeah. And so I'm going to make sure that you have that link if you're interested in this book. And the other thing that I mentioned is that you'll receive an email from us that will include tons of additional resources from this book as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got about 7 minutes, Howard, and we have tons and tons of
Okay.
questions.
Can I just add one little thing here as we're
Yes,
talking about
sir.
resources? I just want to forget about that. If you are interested, anybody out there does want to know, I guess, of some of the key highlights, the key techniques that are in this book, The Agile Guide to Business Analysis and Planning, I have a webinar coming up on December the 6th through the publisher. So if you just check me on LinkedIn at Howard Podeswa, there'll be more details as we get closer to that date.
You know what? And
December
share
6th.
that with me as well.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
I'll include it in our webinar extra
Sure.
email
Sure.
that'll go out.
Yeah.
Um, that'll be a good way if people want to follow you and dive more deeply into this book. They'll
Mm-hmm.
have an opportunity to do that because, of course, today we're trying to cover your entire
Yeah.
writing history in an hour. Okay, so let's.
Somebody asked about getting the book in Iran. The easiest way to get these books, if you're not like in Europe or in North America, I'm guessing will probably be the electronic version because that's easily distributable anywhere, and that's through Amazon or through Inform IT. I know that people who are in Europe generally go to the Amazon.de. Sorry, is it the German, whatever the German site is? I forgot the extension. So if you go to the German version of Amazon, that's a good place to go as well. Yeah, and I say I'm the publisher as well. The thing with this, going to informit.com, I'd go there for electronic books because they have good discounts. But if you're outside of the US, you're going to incur shipping costs. So that's why if you're looking for a hard copy, you want a local, somebody more local.
Yep. And we did have a question. Somebody was asking about how to get it in Europe. So there
Mm-hmm.
there you go. Okay, so let's see. I should have reminded our listeners today, if you see a question in the Q&A box and you have the same question, give it a thumbs up. I have now enabled that. So there you go. If you have the same question, you can give it a thumbs up and I will take these in that order. Let's see. We will head back up to the top. So the first question is from Joseph. What is the most important application or tool to learn from your experience? And I think Joseph is asking like a real tool. I know when you've been talking about tools, Howard, you've been talking about techniques.
Today would be Jira.
Jira, okay. Yeah,
That's
I
it.
feel like that's
Yeah, that's so commonly out there. I mean, you can't go anywhere almost without running into it. So I would say that that'd be number one. In terms of other tools, there's a section actually in the Agile Guide of tools that are out there. And I'm just looking at it right now, and I noticed that the very first one I mentioned there is Jira. But I talk about other ones and for different purposes, so it depends on what you want to do. But Blueprint, another very good one.
Oh, does Blueprint
software.
does Blueprint still exist? It's a requirements management tool.
Yeah, last time I checked, but
Okay.
should check in. Then that's not too long ago. It was only a couple of years ago that I checked that.
Yep. Yep.
And then JAMA, also good for requirements traceability. If you're looking at collaborative work, for self-organizing teams, some people have been using Asana, ASANA. It's a really great product as well that allows teams to self-organize around work, which is a great thing in Agile. And then story mapping is a really strong technique. And in fact, I'll also be I'm working on a new course in story mapping that I'm going to be delivering over the web sometime around February. So it's all going to be through the publisher. So stay tuned for that. So there's an app called Cardboard or Cardboard IT. I think it might be that's used for collaborative story mapping. Also a very useful thing that I would recommend.
All right. So some good tools to think about. This next question is from Yulia. Let's see. If you imagine that you have to use only 3 business analysis techniques for the rest of your life, which techniques would you choose and why? You're on a deserted
Oh
island, Howard.
God.
What are the 3 techniques you're taking with you?
Hmm. Let me think here. Well, I say user stories would be probably the number one today. I wouldn't go anywhere without that. Um, Related to that would be story splitting. And there are story splitting patterns, which I discuss also in the book. That's one of the hardest problems that teams have been facing, how to break down a large piece of work into tiny pieces of work that will still be valuable to the stakeholder. It's not an easy thing to do. So story splitting patterns I put in there as well as a biggie. I still think use cases are extremely valuable as well. Some people may disagree on that one. That might be a little controversial one, but I still think is extremely, extremely useful. If you're not doing use cases, then I would recommend doing something very similar. I discuss actually in the book how if you don't like the term use cases and you want to stay with, words that you're familiar with, I show basically how you can create feature files that are basically do what a use case does, and how you can bring together user stories under a feature file, user story acceptance criteria under a feature file. I think that would be good as well. And finally, I say one other thing, ATD, BDD,
Okay.
acceptance test driven development, behavior driven development. In Agile, a lot of your requirements analysis and documentation and a lot of your analysis work revolves around acceptance criteria. And ATDD is a really good practice for, doing, and with this other BDD part is a really good practice for handling that. So I'd highly recommend that as well.
All right.
Yeah. So I guess those 3 off the top of my head.
Okay. Those are good ones.
I mean, I could add more. MVP, minimum viable product, very, very important as well.
Yeah, I feel like limiting it to 3,
Yeah.
that's a good question.
Yeah, because the experimental approach to planning, discovery driven planning, which is really what this whole MVP process is all about, is really, really crucial when you're doing something novel. And so for any novel product development, I think that's a very powerful technique as well.
Yep. Let's see. We are technically at the end of our time, but how about just one more question, and maybe we can make this a quick answer. This is from David. What is the advice you would give to someone who is new to business analysis and who's and is getting ready for their first certification or getting ready for their first job? As someone that has been there, done that, what would you say to somebody new in the profession?
Well, certification is definitely helpful. I think it's not that helpful for someone who's been at it for a while because your CV is your certification. But getting in just to get through the door, extremely important. I would say subject matter expertise, oddly enough. I think my own experience personally is that a BA does not need a lot of subject matter expertise. Because I feel if you've got good analytical skills, you can walk into a situation, you can pretty quickly bring yourself up to speed and be a very effective BA. I think having good, solid skills as a BA is the most important. However, having said that, when you're applying for the job, it's very hard to get past the recruiters if you don't have that subject matter expertise. So I would say begin your BA, your business analysis practice in a business area in which you have already a lot of expertise. So if you have a lot of expertise in banking and finance, or if it's a lot of expertise in insurance, that's where you should direct your BA activity because that will help get you in the door.
Ooh, that's a great piece of advice. You're exactly right. Yeah, you're exactly right. All right, Howard, thank you so much. And actually, you're going to be back again in
You're having me.
November. We're going to talk about requirements engineering and Nimble. So if you're a member, that's a member webinar. I'll actually include the link to that so you can hear more from Howard on that. And it's been great to talk with you today.
That's been
Thanks
a
so
real
much.
pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for joining us today.
Thanks, everyone. And thank you again, Susan.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye bye.